The moral crisis of modernity. Alasdair MacIntyre is one of the most significant moral philosophers of the 20th and 21st centuries, known for his critique of modern ethical frameworks and his revival of Aristotelian virtue ethics. His work, especially After Virtue, 1981, challenges contemporary moral thought and provides a path forward through tradition-based reasoning. In a world that often feels ethically fragmented and disoriented, MacIntyre's insights offer a compelling argument for a return to virtue, narrative, and communal ethics. What can we learn from MacIntyre about how to live? This exploration will distill key life lessons from his philosophy, helping us navigate moral confusion, build better communities, and cultivate personal excellence. Understanding MacIntyre's philosophy means recognizing that moral coherence requires a structured ethical tradition, a dedication to virtue, and an awareness of the historical context of moral discourse. 1. The importance of moral tradition. One of MacIntyre's core arguments is that morality is not an abstract, universal set of principles but is rooted in historical traditions. In modern society, ethical debates often appear incoherent because they lack a shared framework. This is a direct consequence of the Enlightenment's attempt to construct moral systems independent of tradition. Without a unifying moral tradition, individuals and societies struggle to establish consistent ethical principles, leading to a breakdown in moral discourse. Lesson: engage with a moral tradition. Rather than seeing morality as an individualistic endeavor, find a coherent moral tradition that aligns with your values. Whether rooted in philosophy, religion, or cultural heritage, such traditions provide stability and depth. Engaging with a tradition helps you understand ethical dilemmas in a broader historical and philosophical context. Studying traditions also allows us to recognize the wisdom embedded in historical moral thought, offering guidance on contemporary ethical issues. Practical steps. Read foundational texts from ethical traditions such as Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, Aquinas' Moral Theology, or Confucian philosophy. Join discussions or study groups that explore the ethical frameworks of historical traditions. Reflect on how traditional moral insights can be applied to modern dilemmas. 2. Virtue is a lifelong practice. MacIntyre's revival of Aristotelian ethics emphasizes the idea that virtues are not static qualities but habits developed over time. Unlike modern moral systems that focus on rules or consequences, virtue ethics is about cultivating character. MacIntyre argues that moral excellence is achieved through sustained effort and engagement with a moral community. Lesson: cultivate virtues consistently. A good life isn't about following rigid moral rules or maximizing outcomes, it's about consistently practicing virtues like courage, honesty, and justice. Personal growth requires effort, reflection, and continuous improvement. This means making conscious choices in daily life that reinforce moral habits, seeking feedback from mentors or moral exemplars, and continuously striving toward ethical excellence. Practical steps. Identify key virtues you want to cultivate and reflect on how to practice them daily. Keep a journal tracking your moral progress and areas for improvement. Seek mentorship from individuals who exemplify moral character. 3. Individualism is a moral dead end. Modern moral philosophy, according to MacIntyre, is marked by a radical individualism that isolates people from their communities. He argues that moral development requires participation in a broader social context. Individualism often leads to ethical relativism, where morality is determined by personal preferences rather than shared moral principles. Lesson: build strong moral communities. True ethical growth happens in the context of relationships. Surround yourself with people who challenge and inspire you, and contribute to a community that nurtures shared moral values. A strong moral community provides a framework for accountability and collective moral reasoning, which is crucial in resisting ethical confusion and self-centered decision-making. Practical steps. Engage in community service or group discussions centered on moral and ethical development. Cultivate friendships with individuals who encourage moral growth. Participate in organizations that uphold strong ethical values. 4. The power of narrative identity. MacIntyre believes that human beings understand their lives through stories. Our personal and collective narratives shape our moral outlook and decision-making. Without a coherent narrative, life can feel fragmented and purposeless. Lesson: be mindful of your life story. Consider how you frame your life story. Are you a passive victim of circumstances, or an active participant shaping your own destiny? A well-structured personal narrative can provide meaning and purpose. Understanding your role in a broader moral tradition can also help you make sense of challenges and setbacks, turning them into opportunities for growth. Practical steps. Reflect on pivotal moments in your life and how they have shaped your values. Write a personal mission statement outlining your moral goals. Reframe past challenges as lessons that contribute to your growth. 5. Not all rationality is the same. MacIntyre argues that different moral traditions have their own internal logic. Rationality is not universal but tradition-dependent. This means that what seems rational from one moral framework might appear irrational from another. Lesson: be open to different perspectives. When encountering moral disagreements, recognize that others may be reasoning from a different tradition. Engaging with diverse perspectives deepens your understanding and refines your own moral reasoning. Instead of dismissing opposing viewpoints outright, seek to understand the underlying philosophical traditions that shape them. Practical steps. Study philosophical traditions outside of your own cultural background. Engage in debates and discussions with people who hold different views. Practice intellectual humility by acknowledging the limits of your perspective. 6. Looking back to move forward. Modernity often assumes that progress means leaving the past behind. MacIntyre challenges this assumption, arguing that some of the most profound moral insights come from historical traditions. Ignoring the past often leads to repeating ethical mistakes, whereas learning from it can provide solutions to contemporary moral dilemmas. Lesson: seek wisdom from the past. Don't dismiss older moral frameworks outright. Many ethical traditions contain valuable insights that can guide contemporary decision-making. Studying historical moral thought can help us see patterns and principles that remain relevant in today's world, offering wisdom for both personal and societal moral challenges. Practical steps. Read classic works of moral philosophy and history. Analyze how historical ethical debates relate to present-day issues. Seek intergenerational dialogue to gain wisdom from older perspectives. 7. Moral learning requires exemplars, not just rules. MacIntyre argues that we do not learn morality by memorizing abstract principles, but by observing and emulating virtuous individuals. Ethical growth is best nurtured through role models who embody virtues in action. Without real-life examples of virtue, moral education becomes disconnected from lived experience. Lesson: find and follow moral exemplars. Seek out individuals, whether historical figures, mentors, or community leaders, who exemplify the virtues you admire. By studying their lives and actions, you can gain deeper insights into how virtues are practiced in the real world. Practical steps. Identify individuals, past or present, who embody moral excellence and study their lives. Build relationships with mentors who can guide your moral development. Reflect on how exemplary figures handle moral challenges and apply those lessons to your own life. 8. Ethics is rooted in practices, not just intentions. MacIntyre emphasizes that virtues are developed through participation in practices, sustained, meaningful activities that have their own internal standards of excellence. Examples include craftsmanship, scholarship, or medicine. Engaging in these practices allows individuals to cultivate virtues like patience, discipline, and humility. Lesson: engage in meaningful practices. Find activities that require commitment, skill development, and ethical engagement. True moral growth comes from deep participation in practices that shape your character over time. Practical steps. Dedicate yourself to a craft, profession, or discipline that demands ethical engagement. Reflect on how participation in these activities develops virtues like perseverance and integrity. Avoid superficial engagement, pursue mastery with dedication. 9. Modern bureaucracy undermines moral responsibility. MacIntyre critiques modern institutions for prioritizing efficiency over ethics. In bureaucratic systems, individuals often follow impersonal rules without considering the moral implications of their actions. This detachment leads to a loss of personal accountability. Lesson: take personal responsibility for ethical choices. Instead of blindly following rules or policies, critically examine their moral implications. Ethical responsibility cannot be outsourced to institutions. It requires individual judgment and integrity. Practical steps. Question whether the policies you follow align with your moral values. Speak up against unethical practices within institutions. Develop the courage to act according to moral principles, even when it is inconvenient. 10. The good life is a shared pursuit. For MacIntyre, the pursuit of a good life is not an individual endeavor but a communal one. A flourishing life is possible only within a network of shared moral values, traditions, and cooperative efforts. Lesson: build and contribute to ethical communities. Rather than seeking happiness in isolation, invest in relationships and communities that foster mutual moral growth. The good life is built through shared commitments, not individual achievements alone. Practical steps. Join or create communities that prioritize ethical reflection and moral development. Engage in collective efforts toward common goods, such as education or social justice. Recognize that your well-being is interconnected with the well-being of others. Conclusion: living a purposeful, virtuous life. MacIntyre's philosophy challenges us to think beyond modern individualism and consumerism. A meaningful life requires commitment to a moral tradition, continuous self-improvement, and active participation in a moral community. In a world where ethical discourse often seems fragmented, MacIntyre's insights offer a way to reclaim coherence, purpose, and virtue. By integrating these lessons into daily life, we can build richer, more ethical lives grounded in tradition, wisdom, and moral clarity. The pursuit of virtue is not a one-time achievement but a lifelong journey, one that requires patience, dedication, and the courage to navigate a morally complex world with integrity.